At a glance, Warhammer 40k is a huge bustling archive with seemingly no end. But if you take the time to look closer, then not much will change. You'll still find that it's a frighteningly large grimdark dump of stories, games, and various attempts to break into TV and film.
As Ultramarines. Hello.
Something tells me the blokes in the 80s weren't thinking too hard about a 4-decade-long legacy when they were creating the rule set for their humble tabletop wargame, originally pitched as an extension of fantasy with a technological twist. Despite having several incomprehensible, never-before-seen concepts such as snobbish elves, demons, hell, a swarm of alien bugs controlled by a hive mind, super soldiers, and dwarves who mine, victims of the wargame craze picked up 40k alarmingly fast. Although it can be argued that Games Workshop is still with us today because these things are expensive enough to make even the people who gauge printer ink prices shudder in disgust. It can also be attributed to Games Workshop and its diligent undertaking in making Warhammer 40k, along with its heavily novelized universe, as approachable as possible.
So you start at the beginning with Horus Rising. And the first 4 books, they are chronological, so that's easy. But things get interesting when you get to book 5.
GW's most defined method of spreading wide the gaping lore of the galaxy comes in a collection of novels and audiobooks called the Black Library, not to be confused with the Black Library, a craft world containing knowledge of chaos created by the Eldar race, who are in fact to be confused with the Eldari, since they are one and the same. Before getting desperate and using Reddit or Quora suggestions to jumpstart a Warhammer lore journey, consulting the official Black Library website seemed like a sensible idea. After a few minutes of searching for genre, author, and pricing, it felt a bit like GW was deliberately emulating the Imperium's fascination with throwing progress out the window. Immediately, I also noticed that you cannot sort by faction, which is a bummer. But there is a series tab, which might star the faction you're looking for. That's okay, I felt like exploring 40k through the POV of regular folk anyway, so let's type in First and Only, the name of the incredibly popular Gaunt's Ghost's first novel.
Nothing.
That's a lie, there were 1,219 results. Maybe it's because the one available version of First and Only released as a solo novel is the 20th anniversary edition of the book. You know, the limited edition hardcover version being sold as an ebook on the website. Maybe those few extra words are skewing the search results. Maybe it's just because they forgot to install a search engine on the website in the first place. You know what? I've changed my mind. 40k is at its best when it's following a never-ending fragmented space opera starring a god and his 20 petri dish sons. Looks like I'll be starting at let's see, book 49. It's beginning to sound like the barrier of entry to get stuck in 40k lore relies on your willingness to read a few books, or your ability to shove a headphone in your ear and listen to a British person for 10 hours straight. So, what if you don't like reading books that much? Well, fear not. The Warhammer Amazon production, helmed by Henry Cavill, is on the way soon. Thank God. I was beginning to wonder if it was even happening. You might say that it's my fault for trying to navigate the more intended channels in the first place, so let's just assume for a moment that it's super easy to slither your way into a ginormous lore repository, and that Games Workshop haven't done anything cheeky to discourage the most beloved gateway 40k material out there. You got in somehow, through a game, through a YouTube series, one of your mates non-consensually dropping Warhammer facts in voice chat, or a dusty Horus Heresy book found in your attic. How or where do you even start to answer whether 40k is confusing? I'd say at the beginning, with Rick Priestley, one of the founders of Warhammer 40,000.
I kind of already come up with the idea of the races being based on fantasy races. So the Eldar were part of that. The Orcs were part of that. But quite how those Eldar or Orcs would be manifest within the game, bearing in mind it was a spaceship game, I hadn't really thought deeper.
Aha! Definitive proof that silly old Rick didn't have it all planned from the start. Alright, but for real, why did I just show you a clip of a dude explaining that he didn't have every single facet of 40k sorted out during its conception? As one of the brains behind 40k, Rick most likely had a few things to say concerning its direction, visions or ideas that undoubtedly inspired him to leave GW about 15 years ago. No matter how big or small his contributions to 40k actually were during the late 2000s, his departure must have had a few repercussions. Warhammer 40,000 is riddled with inconsistencies, countless minor changes or straight-up retcons, borderline inaccessible material, alongside attempts to adapt to modern audiences, none of which are surprising when you look at the impressive timeline the game has created. Major creative players coming and going isn't the only thing affecting these factors either. 40k is written by a whole bunch of peeps, each with their own experience and takes on the universe. Take Space Marines as a perfect shining example. The esteemed Astartes, genetically engineered to the peak of human limits, boasting incredible strength, combat prowess, and whatever else the plot requires. Unwavering arbiters of the God Emperor's will.
The Golden God!
To be in the presence of a space marine is a privilege. It's also probably a sign that your planet is about to be absolutely clapped. To come across one corrupted by the ruinous powers is even rarer, and a much more terrifying prospect for normal humans. So, what do Gaunt and his regiment of regular dudes do during a desperate raid in enemy territory, where they come across not one, but two corrupted Iron Warrior space marines? You guessed it, they just fucking shoot them. These hilariously different representations don't always come down to feats of strength, but as the behavior and characterizations of your favorite factions, characters, or whatever cosmic horror the author decided to pull out of their arse on that day.
I'm gonna strangle your parent!
In that sense, the sheer size and disparity of the lore can be a bit confusing. It also means you can kind of just say whatever you want, and to an extent, it'll have some truth to it. The Necrons are pretty chill. Nurgle truly loves his followers, and the Dark Eldar live in a realm of overindulgence, which means an excessive amount of being nice to each other. As a result, you end up with the most confusing part of Warhammer 40k lore. It isn't the Black Library website, or the retcons, or even some of the asspulls and inconsistencies. It's what happens when this clusterfuck reaches the court of public opinion. A maelstrom of interpretations from people who don't know the answers, but don't want to sound like they have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, maybe I just made up a demographic of people for the sake of a narrative. You should be used to it by now. I don't really blame anyone who gets a bit of lore wrong. Those two folks arguing about the lore in any given comment section have some basis or reasoning for what they're saying. Warhammer fans would never make things up, and considering how much material is out there, there's a good chance that they've just read two different perspectives, meaning they're both right.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
When it comes to the more vague concepts like the warp, I'd say it's a tad easier to accept the shenanigans that happen whenever it gets involved, whether it's used to pop out a few demons for a big old fight, create tension and horror for more grounded characters, or to act as a stage so delusional blokes can shit-talk immaterial beings. At the very least, we can all take solace that there is no multiverse, and that the warp will continue bleeding into real space for the sole reason of preserving the never-ending conflict that is Warhammer. That said, if folks cannot come to some sort of conclusion after reading lore, then things can take a turn for the worse. A few months ago, I was thinking about doing a video on Nurgle in relation to Darktide's map design. It mostly came down to translating the language and runes painted on Hive Tertian's many scrappy walls. Although I was completely new to decoding and interpreting language, I was really enjoying myself. For about 5 minutes. I don't think some of this stuff is even meant to be figured out. If it is, the best hints are probably stored somewhere in a Nurgle codex released before I was even born.
From 1792.
You all know a lore YouTuber who spent years of their life covering a game, and they'll still release a video like, yeah, I've got no idea who this is. Did you know that one of the biggest lore dumps for Darktide is in the manual for the bloody board game? What? I understand that the moment everything could be explained, your brain will just drag you into something new and mysterious, and 40k does have the advantage of that being damn right impossible.
If you go back to one of these things and you try and explain it too definitively, it robs it of its mysteries.
However, it doesn't feel great when there's a power level leap in characters to extend a conflict, or a mystery that has a predictable conclusion when you look at Games Workshop as a business. You're not going to wake up one day and read, Tyranids finally eradicated from the universe. Ultimately, answering the self-imposed question of if Warhammer is confusing or not depends on your perspective. It was a question I personally answered for myself the moment I realized how daunting it was to write about the lore for this video. As a newer fan, reading that the books most suggested are older ones that contradict the newer material the most was not a great start. As an older fan, well, I can't really speak from experience, but I imagine it boils down to a kind of acceptance. If you're anything like me and you begin to hate your interests after seeing people's miserable opinions on the internet, then I am sorry if this video has dissuaded you from checking out the 40k lore. It has its moments, and it doesn't really matter how puzzling the lore is if you're enjoying yourself. I am also aware that 40k as a war game is confusing with its many rules and regulations, but I didn't feel the need to get into it. And it's not because I've run out of ways to joke about plastic. I have, but
That's not the point.
if your takeaway from this vid is that you should dive into your local Warhammer store window with an Ongo Goblogan wig and wave your finger at the novel section, then remember that you'd just be harassing someone who knows and enjoys the material anyway. I mean, they work for Games Workshop. If that's not true love, I don't know what is.